Hi everyone, welcome to the IoT Heroes show, my weekly showcase of thought leadership in the Internet of Things. My name is Tom Raftery, I'm the Global IoT Evangelist for SAP, and now, on with the show. Hi everyone, welcome to the IoT Heroes show. My name is Tom Raftery, Vice President IoT for SAP, and with me on the show today I have a special guest, Bruce Sinclair. Bruce, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Tom. Thanks for having me on the show. I think like a lot of people, we can squint our eyes and we can identify, when we started in IoT, and I'm no different. So I started in the Internet of Things in 2008. It wasn't really called that, but I was the CEO of a company. We sold a networking platform to ISPs, and this allowed them to offer smart home services to their customers. So I guess that's when I started in IoT, and we were doing things, and I use this sometimes in my presentations, but we had the ability to use our networking platform, which was based on IPv6, to traverse the NAT. And if anyone's ever worked with home networks, they're real difficult because there's a shared address, right? And so we use IPv6 with proxying and reverse proxying. And but our service that we did, because nobody wanted to buy IPv6, it was so painful. So we had to come up with a service, and at that time, home automation, as it was called, so I'm going to call that IoT, was in action, or was coming on, and we had a service. So I started 9 years ago, if I squint my eyes, in IoT. And since then, I've been the CEO of a couple companies. I'm currently the publisher of IoT Inc., and I do consulting with brands, manufacturers on their strategies. And I also have a podcast and a video series, and I do a meetup in Silicon Valley too.
Excellent. What kind of home automation were you guys doing 10 years ago?
So we were doing, I start, my present, like I do the speech, and I sort of did a little bit in the keynote that I did just last week at Internet of Things World. But I go, picture this scene, it's in the middle of the night in Montreal, and on the 9th floor of the Peel Street, in Art Deco building, the lights start flashing on and off, the air conditioning goes, screens flicker. And then at the same time, I'm in the middle of Tokyo and everyone's around me on my iPhone 1. So that's my point I make, is that command and control, which I don't think is a good representation of IoT, of an IoT product, just doing connectivity, a connected product, for example. But we were doing things like reading sensors. We were doing remote operation. We could turn on and off power sources. We were using old school Zigbee, and I think it was Zigbee or Z-Wave, which I do not recommend today, but we were doing that like 8 years ago, and we're doing all the things that you kind of see now. Granted, I mean, it wasn't necessarily to the same level, being productized. It was more of a proof of concept, I suppose, and then our customers would take that. But KDDI was one of them, in Tokyo. Or in Japan, they're the second largest ISP in Japan, and they were using it to model their home automation.
Fascinating. That was really early stuff, and IPv6 back then too was really early.
Oh man, tell me about it. And our whole company was based on IPv6. And small. The customer has to be able to make money with it. And in the case of IPv6, which was a cost and not a revenue generator, they're going to do everything. They're going to pull out the duct tape. They're going to pull out the twine, anything other than buying IPv6 addresses. And so, in the long, just to make the story short, we lost our last round of financing when I was the CEO of the company. It was in 2008, around that same time, and when things kind of went all to heck. And I did a management buyout of it. I came into Silicon Valley from Montreal, because we were in Montreal, tried to raise the money. And I got to tell you, the VCs are too smart, right? Because it's one of those things, it's just, they're smart in the end. It kind of, everything's good because it all kind of led to this. But it's one of those things that just, IPv6 is still ticking away. We're talking 8 years later, and that was already 8 years into, or 4 or 5 years, when Aaron, for example, and all the internet registries were starting to warn their customers, the ISPs, that addresses were running out. And it's still just, I don't even think we're even at 40% or something for ISPs now. So it's still going, and they did me a favor by not funding the company, because I could tell you the revenues have still been just trickling in at that point.
And you started a podcast, the Internet of Things show. or the Internet of Things Inc. business show, which has been going for quite a while now. How's that going?
Yeah, it's been going for 3 years, and it's been fantastic. I have to tell you, and you can relate with your own show, but I just look forward to it. I just really look forward to talking to people, and kind of like a secret is that I learn. I get to do a show, and at the same time I'm learning. And so I get to approach pretty much anyone I want in the industry. And I was very specific when I started the show 3 years ago. I thought, well, it is a business show, but IoT is so technical that I thought, no, we got to start with the technical basics, and enough for managers to know how it works. My line is, you have to know how it works before you can put it to work. So we started with the sensors. We did the actual sensing technology, the RTOSs on the embedded systems. Then we did the embedded systems. Then with the OT network, the IT network, the uplink. Then we did a whole bunch of series on IoT clouds, then a bunch of them on IoT platforms. Then we jumped into analytics, and then and only then, I think it was I think we had already gone through, and people are listening today, they're still evergreen, but I think 30, 40 episodes, I think 40 episodes or so, 30, 40 episodes before we even started getting into the business side of things, like how do you make money from it and so forth. And yeah, it's just been a joy. I haven't been doing it as much because I've been really busy with my book that just came out, and so it's really been put on the back burner, only going out every 2 weeks, but I'm getting back in the swing of things again, and I'm just super looking forward to cranking it up at least on a weekly basis again.
Yeah. I mean, some of them are really, really interesting, and you re-released some ones that were very good as well, around security and data hoarding and things like that, and they're great. So I would strongly recommend anyone listening, if you're not already subscribed to Bruce's podcast, you should do it. It's the Internet of Things IoT Inc. business show. It's on iTunes and all good podcatching applications, I assume, Bruce.
Yeah. It's on Stitcher as well, and you don't hear about the other. You rarely hear about the other platforms, but yeah, it's available on Stitcher, RSS, and so forth.
But the main reason I wanted to have you on the show is because you're releasing a book. Tell us about that.
So it's now in the past tense. When we spoke, was that a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago? Yeah, it was about to come out, and it was released actually initially for pre-order last week's, and then it's available now on Friday. So we're speaking, 2017 May 22nd now. So it was early, but I saw the book for the first time at the IoT World Conference in Santa Clara, and I was the opening keynote. Thank you. I was the opening keynote, and then right after that, I had both my teenage children sell the book for me right outside the keynote area. Child
labor, I love it.
Child labor. Well, they're teenagers now, right? I think it's totally fine. And I saw the book for the first time, like actually seeing the book for the first time on Tuesday. So we're talking less than a week ago, and so it was fantastic.
That must have been an emotional experience after all the effort that went into it.
It was, and there's a lot of sides to it, but both my kids also sort of observed the whole book writing process, and I think there's a lot of lessons there because it's not an easy thing. I consider it a life achievement, and it's a lot of work. I started in December of last year. I finished it around 9 months later, and then got my publishing deal. Nothing happened for a while, and then heavily editing. I also did a large peer review, and from a lot of people in my podcast too. I had 48 people in the end review 16 chapters. I had 3 people per chapter, so we actually did a peer review before it went to the editor, and then started doing more of the cosmetic editing in terms of using their editors and proofreaders and so forth. So yeah, I involved my listeners. And it was just fantastic. That's another, just putting it out there. One of the things I do teach in the book, and specifically for IoT, is that you need to design, sell, and then build, right? And so, I've done this my entire career, but specifically with IoT, because first of all, you're not really sure what the customer's going to want. They're not really sure what they're going to want. Mm-hmm. And when something is as new as IoT, you really need to test it before you put a lot of resources. And so I kind of applied the same thing to the book. I put it out there. I had people review it, got some feedback, baited it, so to speak, and then made changes to it and released it. So yeah, it's out. It's it's very satisfying. Let's put it that way.
It's funny to hear you say that, because I was at our Sapphire Now event in Orlando last week, and I was at one of the talks by our EVP for IoT. I hate all these acronyms, but anyway, Tanya Roykert, who is
Tanya,
senior. Yeah, and she had one expression which I thought was really good for people, thinking of getting into the Internet of Things. She said, "Start small but think big," which kind of mirrors what you were saying just a second ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it. Start small and think big. And actually, Tanya was one of my endorsers, so she's read the book, and I've known Tanya a little while. But yeah, I agree. Along the same ideas.
So, I mean, thinking about the book and everything that went into writing it, are there any kind of lessons you've learned from it, or any stories from the book which stick out that you'd like to share?
Oh, there are plenty. This is something where you kind of just put everything you have, and the book came from really three different areas. It came from, as I was saying at the beginning of the show, when I was the CEO of an IoT company. I'll squint my eyes when I say that, because, we did do that. It came from all my podcasts, right? It came from all my research, and then it just sort of packages everything together. So it's so much, but the idea is when you do a manuscript this long, it turned out being, the book is 300 pages, 301, 303 pages long. It's satisfying because what you've done is you've kind of tied a bow on everything. You've tied a bow on what you've learned. And in the book, in the case of the book, I break it up into three parts. There is the business of IoT. And so that is, how do you make money with it? How do you create value with IoT? How do you monetize it? That goes along with the business models. The second part was on the strategy. So how is IoT going to change your industry? How is it going to change the competitive landscape? What do you need to do from an operational point of view in your company? I also get into requirements. How do you define the requirements? And with IoT, you can instrument a lot more than just a product. And then the last section was technical, because again, we're so early on in IoT that I think you have to have a bit of a sense of the technology. But if I can say, I've got a couple things, but I think from a technical point of view, one of the main lessons from the book is I look at technology not so much from a networking stack, because I think it's not valuable looking at it that way. So since this is a business book, although it's a technical book too, but since it is a business book, I look at the technology from a value perspective. And in my view, the number one technology component that's certainly not in the narrative of IoT today is the concept of a software-defined product, or a digital twin. Mm-hmm. And this is virtualizing the physical into a model and an application. And the whole point of it is so that you can interface the physical product, like software, into the internet. And once you've done that, you can create so much more value than just what I was doing 8 years ago with command and control, by just, turning on and off devices or reading devices with a phone. I kind of have a pet peeve of smart products. We've had them for 50 years. We've had them in the lunar control module, the Apollo controller module. We've had embedded systems. We've had connected products at least for almost 10 years. Even I was using them. But my big shtick with the book is look at it, at least from a technology perspective, as software. So you virtualize your product. And when I say product, it could be also a system or environment, but virtualize your IoT product in the software, because once it's in a software form, it just opens up so much more of what the product can do, from a value perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we've seen that in SAP ourselves with things like the Asset Intelligence Network and the FedM acquisition that we announced last year. Mm-hmm. That the FedM one is our digital twin technology acquisition, and there was a big announcement about that at Sapphire. Yeah. In fact, not 10 minutes ago, I published a video on YouTube of an interview I did with the CEO of FedM on YouTube. So, and he's talking about the digital twin technology. And at the Sapphire event, the Sapphire Now event in Orlando, they had a beautiful demonstration of the technology at work. It was unbelievably simple and showed you exactly what it does. And I actually took a quick video of that last week and just published it direct from phone. And what it was a thin metal strip standing vertically with a bolt on top of it, and that was connected to a laptop. And on the screen of the laptop, you had a computer representation, a digital twin of the thin metal strip with the bolt on top. And then as you moved, as you put your finger on the bolt and pulled it left or pushed it right, the one on the screen moved as well. But what was even more impressive is, as it was moving on the screen, you saw mapped on the thin metal strip where all the stresses were occurring on the strip. And of course, that was all recorded. And then you get a lifetime's history of any stresses and strains and pulls and torques and things like that on the strip. So now you can predict over the lifetime of that, in this case, thin metal strip, but it could be anything from, wind turbines to aircraft cowlings to whatever, when it's likely to fail. So that I thought that demonstration just by itself was really telling.
No, it is, and number one, I would like to talk to FedM for my show because I want to highlight, everyone listening now, this is a super important topic, and you brought up 2 points. The first point you brought up was descriptive analytics, so that's a methodology for visualizing what's happening with this metal strip, and the second one is that you mathematically modeled that metal strip. Now that in itself, I use the example of a spring. You have to get into statistics. So now we're starting to move into the realm of analytics and modeling. So modeling is critical because modeling is used by both the application. So what you saw, it actually displaying it and capturing the data from it, but it's also used by analytics. And it's really modeling and analytics and application. I call them the trio of value. That is where you start when designing the technology for an IoT product. And then everything kind of falls out from there. But yeah, this is where you get into statistics. They're not just regular, you're not just using your regular high school physics, to come up with it, in terms of parametric technology. This is all stochastic technology, how you're representing it. And that's the key, right? The key is linking these models to now analytics. So then when you do this thousands and thousands of times, you do this little shake with the sprint, with the metal strip. Again, it's just an example, but it learns. And then eventually maybe that strip is going to crack. And then at some point you're gonna have captured the data, and then you create what you call as a failure signature in the data, and you can then when you're measuring your metal strip, whatever the product is, you can then the analytics can go back and say, wait a second, I've seen this before. Yeah, exactly. You go, what? Right? Oh yeah, no, I've seen when these variables are in this particular configuration over this particular time series of data, I'm going to make a prediction. What's the prediction? I predict it's going to crack. Right, and so this is why it's so important. But I did not know about the company FedM, and I will definitely look into them.
I'll send you an intro after this call to the CEO.
Perfect.
His name's Arnulf, and you can have a chat with him. I'll tell him all about it. But tell me more about the book. Who is it aimed at? Who are the ideal customers? Who would benefit most from purchasing this book?
Well, it's aimed at anyone who creates a physical product. And so this is one of the challenges when writing something like this, and maybe I kind of blew it by making it so broad, but it really is, at least in my view, the future of any physical thing, any physical product sold is going to be part of the internet. And if you believe that, then it doesn't matter what industry you're in. It doesn't matter, what the technology you're using today. I believe it's eventually going to be connected into the internet. Now, how you do it, it can be done hand-fisted by maybe just connecting it to a phone, or it can be a little more sophisticated, like what we're talking about with this digital twin. I call it a software-defined product in a similar nature as software-defined networks. But so it's for at a high level, it's for manufacturers, it's for brands, it's for enterprises that maybe are either building IoT into their product they're going to sell to their customers, or using IoT in their companies. And that's kind of like the push and pull. So it could be a product manager, it's basically for managers though. You're not going to program from this, but you do get pretty deep so that the manager, whether they're a like a director or chief or CTO or CIO, they'll be able to talk, stand toe to toe with their developers about the technology. And similarly, if you're a product manager or you're managing a line of a business, or your business unit manager, you too will get that understanding. But it's really, it's broad because it is for pretty much any company that's making something, and then for management, I guess, just to understand. And again, the perspective is, this is cool technology, sure. However, how do we use it? How do we use it in a way to create incremental value? And once we create incremental value, that means we can create some incremental revenue for our company.
Gotcha. Yeah, because you don't want to be doing technology for technology's sake. It actually has to save the company money or make the company money, or ideally both.
Yeah, and I, as a consultant, and I guess that's the other area. Maybe I forgot when as part of writing the book, I've gone into a lot of companies, and maybe you're listening now and you're gonna recognize this, but you're working in your lab, and I come in and they say, well, Bruce, we're trying to figure out whether we should be using Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. We already have our platform figured out. And I'm like, oh man, no. And so what you have to do when you're, at least from my perspective, when you're looking at IoT and an IoT product, you work from the top down. The first thing is you develop what is your value proposition. So that's qualifying the value of your product. You then are going to build this model, and that can be very simple, but it's kind of like this digital twin we're talking about. But for a manager, it can be very high level. But in that case, you're quantifying the value proposition. Then from there, you go, all right, this is what I'm trying to do with my product, both qualitatively and quantitatively. And now what information do I need to gather? Because if you think about it, all incremental value for an IoT product comes from transforming data into useful information. So we identify the information, and then from there we ask ourselves, all right, what data do we need to get this information to create this value? And then, and only then, do you start looking at the technology. And so it really has to be a top-down perspective. Not that that's any new thinking, but again, it has to be disciplined, specifically when you're in an area like IoT, which is relatively new, and people just love to, to play around with it. And I'm no different, right? Shiny things.
Testing the depth of the water with both feet.
Yeah, just jump in. But that's the problem is, from any company, the technical group will have a budget to tinker. However, if you want to get it into the market, you're going to have to go beyond that, and they're not going to have the budget to go beyond that. And so, in order for, if you're in a company right now and you want to do something, you're putting up your hand, you want to do something in IoT, you need to make a business case for it, right? I mean, it's as simple as that. So there's nothing new here. However, maybe it's just maybe shining the light on it again to remember people, because they just love playing with the tech, right?
Indeed.
I do.
And now that the book is out, Bruce, what's next for you?
Well, I'm going to get back to working with clients again. I kind of put that a little bit. I just kept more or less just like one client throughout that whole last maybe 4 months. Getting back into that, and I'm actually developing from there. I'm developing an online course. There'll be actually 3 online courses. There'll be the business course. It's just going to match the book, the business course, the strategy course, and the technology course. I do workshops, and I've been doing workshops for a couple years now, and that's in fact where the book came out of. I was doing these workshops, and they were getting, they're well received, and I thought, well, and so I do the workshops, but I also realized that, most of the time I do sometimes go into companies, but most of the time it's at conferences, and people have to come, to the mountain, so to speak. And so I'm going to put them online, and I think that way I'll be able to reach a lot more people. So yeah, I think that's going to be the main thing, and I also work more on my media site, because that has been where the podcasts are. I do videos as well and write articles and so forth, and I'm starting to accept external authors, and so I'll be focusing a lot there as well.
Oh, cool, very good. We're coming to the end of the show, unfortunately, Bruce. But if people want to know more about you or the book or any events you'll be at or anything like that, where should they go? What should they do? Where would you send them?
Okay, well, there's three places. First one's on Amazon. So if you're interested in the book, just do a search on IoT Business Book or IoT Inc. I think book. You should be able to find it. If you want to get a whole bunch of free information that I've been working on for the last 3 years, talking with folks like yourself and other industry leaders, they can go to my website. It's www.iot-inc, so iotinc.com. And then lastly, if you want to find out about what I'm doing and the services I offer, I'm at www.brucesinclair, all one word, .net.
Okay, very good. Very good. And if you send me a couple of those links, Bruce, I'll include them in the show notes so people can just click on them. So without even having to do the search, just make it easy as possible. Okay, I think that'll wrap up the show. Any last words before we bow out?
No, I think what's important is you're just getting down to the fundamentals. So the technology is cool, but how do you create value? Think about the value proposition, then think about how you're going to position it within the market, and then from there things fall out and the technology falls out. And so I think it's just a mindset, but everyone here wants IoT to be successful, and it's just a technology, right? But so what we're talking about is how to leverage that technology within business, and I think that'll be the next step. The bells and whistles only get us so far. Now we have to reach all those billions and trillions of projections, right? And so that's going to be the business perspective.
Excellent. Bruce, thanks a million for coming on the show today.
No, my pleasure, Tom, and I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to address your audience.
No problem.